like October 7th happen, when there is so much intelligence in the region and there's these Mossad forces, there's the CIA, was it hundreds of people stormed the border of Israel and did this brutal attack? Presumably they had intel that was going to happen.
Correct. I mean, the findings since the day of the attack have shown that there were multiple reports, there were multiple operators and officers who escalated this problem. One of the downsides of democracy is that when you have a bureaucracy that has channels of command and people have to agree and collaborate and validate each other's information, everything moves much slower. So and anybody can contribute to this, but for October 7th, the IDF was in charge of border patrol, border security. The IDF meaning the Israeli Defense Force, which is a military unit. They were in charge of the location where the attack happened. And they saw evidence of rehearsals and practice attacks, and they saw an escalation of conflict. And they reported up through the bureaucratic chain of command. But somewhere in that chain of command, somebody saw it differently.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Shin Bet, which is essentially the FBI equivalent in Israel.
Internal security, never got the complete accurate memo from IDF. And then Mossad's information on what may or may not be happening was obviously never part of the finished intelligence that did make it up to the policymakers. So there was evidence that was only really identified post-fact, which is exactly what happened with 9/11 too. There was information that was only identified after the effect.
And I think it's also the good old cliche, hindsight is 20/20. Applies in all of these situations, whether it's Pearl Harbor or 9/11. I mean, intelligence failures are what change the trajectory of history. But if you do interview a lot of CIA people, as I do, I often hear this, and it may or may not be true, which is, Annie, no one ever hears all the attacks we stopped.
Yeah, of course.
And then I say, well, tell me about them. They're still classified, So, I mean, that's why narrative is so interesting to me because, first of all, it feels personal because you can relate to it. Even if we can't relate to being in the White House, we can certainly relate to being stubborn about not wanting to change your opinion or, putting together a certain set of facts and saying, we all probably do this in our own home. Oh, this, therefore that. And then we're wrong.
I've built companies from scratch and backed many more. And there's a blind spot that I keep seeing in early stage founders. All tension with they've said that there's this ceasefire, but it doesn't look like a great ceasefire.
There's a crisis of legitimacy that this current Islamic government has to reckon with domestically. They have to now look at their people and say, okay, we basically failed to defend you. They're trying to spin that narrative saying that they did defend the homeland. And they're trying to use nationalism as a sort of a salve, as a treatment to justify or to explain or to sort of wash over what happened. There's going to be new leaders. The supreme leader right now is frail. He's been frail. He's been on the verge of death for years now, setting aside attempts to kill him. And the crisis of succession, who comes next, is going to be now amplified much more, a greater sense of urgency. And then whether or not the next leaders of the Revolutionary Guard, which is sort of Iran's. So just to explain something, Iran has two militaries. There's the Iranian military that protects its borders and domestic security, oddly enough. And then there's the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is protecting the revolution. The R in IRGC stands for revolution. The I does not stand for Iran, it stands for Islamic. In other words, they are protecting what happened in 79. They are not interested in the country. That's what the army does. The army protects the country. The IRGC protects the movement. And so the IRGC is the most powerful entity in Iran. And who their next generation of leaders or next level of leaders that rise up, what their views are. Are they willing to cooperate with the rest? Are they going to double down on nuclear enrichment? Are they going to take things underground? Are they going to kick out the IAEA permanently? Are they going to pull out of the NPT? We don't know the answer to these questions. And what's the public unrest going to be like? Can somebody emerge? Because you cannot have resistance without a movement led by, a figurehead of some kind. And this regime has been incredibly good in the last few days. They've executed 3 or 4 potential people who they think could emerge as
Wow, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
They killed 3 or 4 people.
About 3, I think. Three for sure. There's a 4th. I'm waiting to get confirmation. Yeah, people that they're afraid of, who could use this period of instability and dysregulation to foment rebellion and insurrection. It's the last thing they want.
And that's where I'm going to butt in here, and you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were in a different presidency and a different era, like, this is where the CIA would be in Iran and would be fomenting change, because that is ultimately what the American goal is.
Which is absolutely should not be doing, ever. It did it in 53.
But
and
I didn't say it should or shouldn't. I'm just saying it would have.
Meaning
Right?
not should or shouldn't from a moral perspective. It just simply doesn't. It doesn't work. For this to have legitimacy for decades to come, it has to be organic, homegrown, free range. Grass-fed.
The agency can sometimes hide itself so dramatically that it's not even known it's there.
Iran is
We
not.
want your opinion, but
Iran,
that's where
Iran is, and again, I say this as a very proud Persian. Iran is different than I think other theaters of conflict where the CIA has operated. Iranian civilization and nationhood goes back thousands of years. It's very different. It does not take wild. It's not like Iraq, which is a fabricated state, didn't exist until 1917, 1918 after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, or, the modern Middle East is very different. So you want to meddle in the Middle East, fine, but Turkey, Egypt, Iran, these are nations that have existed for thousands of years. That's a game that the United States intelligence agencies, and I would add MI6, the UK, hasn't figured it out either.
Andrew, what do you think happens next in this region? Are we going to reach peace? Are they going to form an alliance with the US?
So I'm smart enough not to debate, because I am largely ignorant on the political divisions and internal politics of Iran, and I know that CIA has very little idea of what's going on in Iran most of the time, also. And I am suspicious that a big part of why we went in at all was because Netanyahu and Israel said, here's the intelligence that we have. It's a very common game in the world of intelligence. If you have 80%, if you have 100% of knowledge, you're only going to share 20%. And you're going to share the 20% that benefits you.
Do you think that's potentially what happened?
I absolutely think that's
So
what
you
happened.
think Netanyahu and Israel could have given selective intelligence to the United States to provoke them to get involved?
That's it. It only makes sense. It's what a professional intelligence service would do. It's exactly what the United States does.
And you don't think the U.S. knows that, though? They're only getting titrated amounts of information?
No, I think even if they did know that, Netanyahu understands the Trump mentality of horse racing.
That's
right. And there's the world of intelligence is a nasty game. We call it a gentleman's game, but it's not at all. It's a game of twisting people's distortions and cognitive dissonance and playing into biases and politics, and it's a nasty game.
So what